Greetings everyone. Today we're going to walk through the time clock. It's a clock in and out application that will be tied to the work order that we've been developing that will generate a work order for your web development project. You can time out how many hours you worked per ticket, and that way you can have a solution to how much you want to charge somebody based on your time involved. And as you can see here, I've got a couple of hours put in. I'll select the month that I'd like to view. Coincidentally, they're the same day because it's just a day. So I clocked in and out twice. Let's say I had a break or something. Who cares, really? But as you can see here, it's represented as this and that, and it's also represented here as the total hours worked. So you can pretty much use this for anything. It doesn't have to be, just for web development. Obviously, it's a time clock for your services. So as I clock in, you can see here it says I'm currently working. It's December 24th, and it's 8:35. And as you can see down in the local storage, all these are representative in JSON. And this here, the no time yet, is ultimately the flag that tells this thing to have the clock out button showing so they can perform that function. And it's obviously not going to be represented because you're still working. Anyway, what we're going to do is take this React application. It's running this thing. And as you can see, it's running a couple things, actually. So we've got the hourly bar chart, which is an Apex chart. It's a bar graph. And that's a fairly simple, straightforward application that we'll be implementing here to visualize your data. And then from here, here's the number crunching that we're going to do. And then, of course, we've got your interface. And here is where the React Apex chart is going to be located. We're just going to be using Apex chart. I'm going to tear this out of React and put it in vanilla JavaScript so that it can be hosted on GitHub for free, tied with, like I said, my other invoice generator. And then we'll see what else we want to do. This is just a free tool that I'm providing for people in my field, and I hope you guys will be able to utilize it to your advantage. Let's go ahead and build our file directory. I'm going to go ahead and just open up my console and build out which files I need. I'm going to need a CSS folder, a JavaScript folder, and within these I'll have files. Initially I'll start off with a functionality in the JavaScript folder, and then a style in the CSS folder. So now, as you can see, I'm just going to copy all this out of my React file, take it over to my new software, my vanilla JavaScript, and I'm also going to update the HTML. We'll be using this as a template, which is the invoice builder, and I'll just take out the meat of that, and then we'll put in what we want for our time clock. And as you can see, it's already kind of put together. Let's just update the title, and from there we're going to go ahead and change out the headings, and like I said, we're not going to need a lot of this other stuff. So let's just start, taking it out. Now we will need the footer and the alert div, so those will stay. And as you can see, we still have a few of the files connected that we will still need from our last application. It has validate, which is going to be useful. I think timestamp is not going to be needed, so we might be able to take that out. But let's go ahead and take a look at the HTML structure and see, where we're going to have the elements for the body. Okay, so let's take a look at the JavaScript that we're going to need and the JSX that will be converted to HTML. And clearly you can see that since React is loading things as it happens, we're going to have to change that a bit. We'll be building things on load, or when a function happens, when somebody clicks something, we'll have to basically build it and then populate, as opposed to React. React basically is always on a loop, coming through and seeing if something needs an update, and then it updates, and we don't have that, so we're going to base everything on when someone actually click something. And then from there, we'll be able to do the whole mapping out of what exactly the new data looks like, and then we'll implement it and we'll put it in. It's not more work. It's really kind of close to what we were already doing. Just forget about mapping and then basically think about us doing for loops, and we're basically building upon one string after next until we've compiled the whole thing, as opposed to mapping through it. Here, like I said, we're going to need a few things like the timestamp and the functionality are just files that we're going to hold different functions that we'll be accessing. Timestamp is going to be one of those things where we're going to utilize it to get started on when someone clocks in and clocks out. It's fairly obvious, but it's just something that I've put together a long time ago that gives me the time format that I want. So when you look at these files, let's go take a look at the JavaScript's Apex chart demos, and let's take a look at how they're built. As you can see with the docs, this would be an import if you had React. So down here is how you import it if you're just using vanilla JavaScript. It's just a script link. And I'm just going to put it in here in my head of the index page. All right, and let's go ahead and update the variables, because we can't use state anymore. We're not using React. But I mean, it's no surprise. That's really just a form of what they do for variables, like set state and things like that, or use state. That's all, that's just a variable. So don't get too hung up on like it sounds impressive. It's not. It's just another term. So it's actually less work to do it this way. So we're just going to stop calling the functions the way that we are and call them the way that they actually are intended. So when we do an on change or a click, it's going to be firing off, not the way we used to do in React. And anything where we have a map, like I said, we're going to have to build these out on load and then have them ready. And I'm just going to build out exactly what I just said. I need to have the months available to be selected. So I'm just going to build that out since there is no mapping, and then I'll place it where it needs to be in the select menu. Yeah, I'll do that pretty much everywhere I need to, and then obviously all the functions need to be correct with the way HTML does it. It doesn't look like I have my classes in yet, so anything that says class name needs to be switched over. Anything that says props is no good. There's no props anymore. So we need to determine what an email is basically at the very beginning of the process, and then we're going to be passing that around. So ideally what we're going to do is have them fill out something here that says what their email is, and if they don't have any data just yet, this is their chance to start typing something in. However, if they don't have any data, we also want to give them an opportunity to start. So this is where that all happens. And let's go ahead and keep going with the replacing of the use state and set state to the simple updating of a variable. It's as simple as that. And use effect, if I'm not mistaken, that's not even, we're not even going to be doing this anymore. So eventually this is going to be commented out. So we're just kind of pummeling through, and it's just kind of tedious work to basically take something from React back to JavaScript. It's a matter of updating your HTML, changing it, use state to your variables, getting rid of anything that has, a React function like use effect, and then from there you're also gonna start building things on load or on some kind of action the user has performed. So we do not have the continuous loop looking for changes, but it doesn't really matter. We never really had it in the first place until React or something like it, like Node, came along. So this is very much like how I learned how to do it in college. I guess what I'm trying to say is, if the software that you're using, like Angular or React, is not helping you in any manner, like if you can get the same thing done with less work or even the same amount of work, then why exactly are you using something that you have to compile, something that you have to have a ton of dependencies on, something that always goes out of date? Like, why? What is the reasoning behind this? I mean, if I wrote something and then all of a sudden, like a couple of years later, like somebody wants to build onto it and I can't because, oh, hey, like all these software packages have moved on and now this thing's out of date. So updating is going to be a real pain in the ass. Everything conflicts and you can't get new stuff in there because it's not compatible with the old stuff, and it's a real pain. So what benefit are you getting from using a framework that's always on the move? It's a moving target. And not only that, in a couple of years, someone else is going to come out and make another one. And so you have to learn that one, and it'll be the same thing. It's just I've said it a million times, engineers can always be predictable in the fact that they over-engineer. They just don't know when to stop. And then from there, you forget the fact of, I'm trying to get from A to B. Now you're just in a huge pissing contest trying to show off, and you forget the whole point. Anyway, that's just me on my soapbox. I don't want to waste my time learning something that's going to be extinguished. I can stick with the basics and get my job done fast and right, and something that's easier to read. Anyway, so we're clearing out all the class names and making it say class, because clearly we don't know, it's not going to know what that means. Class name is something in React. So now that we've gotten all of these variables connected, I also want to reiterate, there's an interesting thing here I found, that a lot of times when you're looking in JavaScript for dates, they come out as like it's not a number, and you need to make it a number if you're going to be like adding and subtracting and stuff. So just keep that in mind. It's going to be a big pain if you start messing with dates and you realize it's just concatenating strings and stuff instead of adding them. And we'll experience that here in a little bit. So I'm now putting in my validate, because we need to make sure that is an email address and it's in the right format with the @ symbol and the period at the end with a couple more characters. And here we go. Now it's saying, hey, you've got no data. There's no length here. The data doesn't have a length, and so this is a problem. There's a few ways around this. This is not one of them, what I'm writing. This is going to break because data length, remember, is not working. So as you can see here, I'm going to type this up. It's going to tell me the exact same error, saying we don't know what that is. And it's a pain, because you'd think, hey, if there's no length, just keep moving. Like, just don't count anything. There's no length. We won't count anything. Well, it doesn't do it like that. You see, that's not a thing. So let's go on. Try catch is what we're going to use to avoid that error. If, in fact, there's a risk that what we're asking for does not exist, then go ahead and do try catch. And so therefore you can skip over. It'll say, hey, by the way, that's no good. Instead of stopping your application and shutting you down and telling everything it's broken, if you do this, it'll say, by the way, that didn't work. We're just going to let you know, and we're going to keep moving. It's very useful. Okay, so we're starting to see a little bit more about what's going on. The error is starting to show up in my alert, and it looks like the HTML is a little bit out of whack. So let's change those divs up so that the error messages will be all across the screen as opposed to a portion. So yeah, that's some weird. I see some weird stuff going on here. I'm just trying to see how this works, how I wrote it. It looks like there's some useless JavaScript here that I think I come in here in a little while and just wipe this out. This if ym equals year, and then it does the exact same thing otherwise. So as you can see, this is kind of a little bit messy. We're gonna have to clear this up. Email is going to be something that's going to be updated, and then not only that, when email shows, it's going to be used. So what I do here in a little while is I consolidate. Anytime the email is asked for, I run the validation and I provide the email right then and there. So I'm going to move it out from where it is currently and make it its own function. And that really does help, because I asked multiple times if what the email is, and so you only want to ask one time. And so let's just swing it down into only one function doing that. And you'll see here in a second what I'm up to. Okay, so let's go ahead and get the other file out that we're going to need to convert. It is the in-out, no, clock in, clock out. Yeah, clock in, out, JS. So this is basically the interface for what we're going to be doing. So the button and then the hourly information. I just pasted it in, and I need to start going through and clearing out the JSX syntax, because it's not going to be useful. And then we'll just go ahead and start converting it to the requirements that a standard vanilla JavaScript will require for HTML file. And so I'm going to go ahead and comment this out so that when someone comes around here, they can see that, oh, it used to be a React file, this was a map, and this was a ternary operator, and so on and so forth, which, yeah, I'm not going to be using them anymore. These will all be determined when a function is executing, as opposed to the ternary operator is super useful, but I tend to use it more in React, and I do not use it here so much in vanilla JavaScript, but useful, very useful. Especially when you want to change things on the fly and you don't want to have to keep asking like ifs and statements and whatnot. So it's super helpful. I see some people they do use it in their vanilla JavaScript, and I should probably be more open to doing that, maybe in the future. Anyway, we got to get rid of all the class names and turn it class. We all know that that's no good. And since we don't have that ternary operator, we're going to have to hide this button that says clock out, and then we'll determine whether that button needs to be displayed based on when someone has a clocked in or clocked out already represented in their data. So I'm just cleaning up some HTML here. And bear with me while I make things pretty. And then just use the developer panel to kind of see where we stand and highlight a few items and just get this back on track. There we go. That looks normal. All right, so here's the functionality that we needed for the clock in out. And I'm just going to go ahead and just grab what I need. And we can see here that once you're done building all these pieces of information, you have to populate the data up here in the function and then hit where the target goes in the HTML element. Yeah, this is the one part I was talking about, how since we're not mapping, we've got to build the strings out of the code we have developed here, and then we put it into a target, and that target gets populated in the HTML. So let's get to it. Let's do a for loop, and we're going to go through all our data that we've generated. And we're going to go ahead and build an empty string that will eventually be targeted at the HTML element. Right now it's empty. And we add it to itself on each iteration. And here is our what we used to have. So let's go ahead and get that line item string together and then make sure that the HTML and everything looks correct syntax wise. Yeah, it looks like I missed a T there. I'm out. Great. Well, I think I remember this part, and I actually did go back and fix it before it caused me too much damage. But as you can see, when you do copy and pasting and things like that, it's really easy to have a human error. So luckily, one thing about developing is the computer's just going to tell you that you have an error, and then it's going to tell you the line. So it's not such a huge, showstopper. It's just a pain. But as you can see, I've looped through this, all the data. I've told it if it's this, punch out this line item. If the person's currently working, punch out this line item. And when they compile all these together into the clock in and out variable string, now as you can see, I'm putting it to the get element by ID clock in and out window. And then this string will appear there, as opposed to what we were doing with React, where it was just mapping through once the data was updated. Yeah, so we're still having a little bit of problems. Let's go ahead and figure out why. What this looks like to me is that this for loop is actually inside another for loop because it did it multiple times. So let's just kind of play around with it and then put it somewhere else and see what happens. And we'll move on from there. I remember going through this and kind of moving it around a little bit, and then I found a reasonable spot at the end. But anyway, let's keep moving and see what is next. As you can see, I've got my hours showing up. The amount of hours are listed, and then I don't see like the actual total working. It's just it looks like it's concatenating down there. It's not adding anything. It's kind of a mess. So that's going to be another issue we're going to have to iron out. Like I said earlier, when you start dealing with like strings, you have to convert them. First off, you got to find out if it's an actual number that can be converted in, because that other one over there that says no time yet, it's a string. So that will come up with a not a number symbol, which can be detected and will be useful. So let's go ahead and tell it a little bit more about where we want that target of information to go with all the totals. And we can kind of see here, when I fill in my email address again, it's just concatenating these strings. It's not adding a number. This is a clear sign that that's not working. And so I'm going to do some attempts to try to sniff out if it's a number, and if so, then I'll be adding it, and if not, then I will not be adding it. And in this scenario, I'm going to be saying, hey, I'm using the method of type of. The method's going to say if it's a number or a string or what have you. But unfortunately, I don't know why it gets treated as a number. This is some kind of strange thing in JavaScript where I'm asking if it's a number. Not a number symbol shows up, gets added for no reason, and then moves forward. Okay, well, that's not a number, and I have to find out that the hard way. Yeah, see, it's not even adding anything. But you can see it works down there. So let's try this again. And I'm not using the call. I wrote the syntax wrong. So for each, and then there's supposed to be a dot call. I'll fix it in a second. Yeah, it's just me kind of struggling to figure out, what's going on. And here, I'm going to tell it to go ahead and show my buttons on clock out if possible, and so on and so forth. I need to toggle the buttons. If someone's already working, they can only see the clock out option. There. So that's that. Now we got to get back to totaling the hours. And this is our target. I don't know how many times I'm going to have a data, yeah, there, I fixed the call. I don't know how many times this is going to be asked for in the future, so I did a for each, because there might be more places I want to put the total hours. That's why it doesn't have just a inner HTML equals. And so I'm just finalizing what I want to do here. And I also realized that this if statement doesn't really work. And so I'm trying a couple other things. It turns out that not a number, it's not represented as anything but a string. So this was the confusing part, that I thought not a number, okay, this is going to be something it knows and it realizes that's not a number, and you would assume that it would recognize that. It does not. Anyway, so we'll get back to that part. I'm going to go ahead and put in my clock out JavaScript for the graph. We don't need to use effect. I'm not going to use it. It's not a thing. And once again, we're going to clear out all the functionality of use state and then represent our variables. Now, we're going to have to, not only do we go through and find them, we replace the use state concepts at the top, but everywhere the set clock in or set total hours is represented, we're basically going to take that and, just take the variable equals method instead. So there is no setting state, but it's a super easy thing to just replace. Yeah, so anytime it says set state, we just say time equals and whatever that was. We're going to run through set run timer, do the same thing, run timer equals true. And just go to the next one, if else, and run timer equals false, if that's the case. Now, we don't need a loaded, and set time clock. Time clock is just an empty array right here, and then here it's temp data. So, next time clock is going to equal temp in or out. And we just go through the entire file looking for that and replacing it. Set clock in is now clock in equals true for that. Clock in equals false here. And we're just double checking. Set total hours, we don't have that anymore. It's just total hours equals temp total. There you go. So we have replaced all these set, states. And we're just turning them into variables. Not difficult. Let's see how we're standing. We got some issues. Yeah. So here's when it comes to props. There is no props, not because this isn't React. And anytime this email gets called, we need to make sure that we have that email on ready to go. So initially, I'm going to put this together into a function that basically lets me make sure that I have the email address when necessary. And it will validate right then and there. And if it doesn't have the address, then ultimately it will return false after an alert. But otherwise, it will return the email when we ask for the function. And so anytime somebody asks for that, I call that function, and then that'll be that. So props email is now just turned into that function that returns the email that is ready to go. Let's just go ahead and call it what it is, email equals run email. And then from here, we'll just take out the props dot. It's fine. Okay, what else other than syntax we need to fix? So yeah, any place that says what the email is, we'll go ahead and standardize that so we only have it written once. And this for each. Yeah, what happens here is it just looks like it's still broken, so Yeah, so we can't clock in and clock out correctly. So we need to add and remove these buttons when they see fit. So if they detect that the person is still working, it says no time yet, that means they're still working. And if that's ever anywhere, then we have to have the clock out button available, not the clock in button. It won't make any sense. Yeah, see, this is a disaster. Got to get this all kind of reset, because that was a clock, no time yet, multiple times. That doesn't even make sense. So we got to make sure that this is toggling correctly. Yeah. It's still not quite there. What I end up doing is I turn all the data into a string and detect if that no time yet is somewhere listed in there on the index of as a number. And if it is a number as opposed to -1, then I assume that this person's working. And so, that's the fastest way to figure it out, as opposed to iterating through it. I just turn it into the whole data into a string and check for this one set of characters. And we're slowly dialing down what we want. Yeah, so I don't think we should even have the clock in, clock out buttons available until we have an email address. But we'll see what happens here. I think I end up, I move these out. Once I have an option, then I can tell what's going on. And then after it basically updates, we need to update the element, HTML element as well, right as soon as it gets updated. So like I said, I'm checking to see just in one spot, and I basically put it all to a string, and it said, does this have the phrase no time yet? And if so, then we know that this person's working. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to consolidate this code. That way I don't have to repeat it. This needs to be built out on load, and it also needs to be built out when they add something. So I'm going to make a populate time and then pass the data through here, because now there's two different places I need to basically build this. One is when we load, and one is when I make an update to my timetable. And so we just go ahead and stick these at the end of the functions when everything is finished and ready to go. Here we go. My total hours is there. Let's hope it doesn't concatenate instead of add, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, all this can go to the bottom part. Index of, no time yet. It's not -1, then that's it. There you go. It seems okay. Like I said, when we're adding the total hours together, right now it's just concatenating, and it's not very good. See that? That's not a number. There's 2 decimal points in there. They're just adding the 2 strings together. You see that is not a number? That's not a thing. So I tried this. Type of number equals number, and lo and behold, NaN keeps on moving like it's a number. So this is where I was a little bit pissed off, because I thought, hey, this is clearly going to work. There's no way it thinks that's a number. But NaN, which stands for not a number, literally gets added. It just keeps on moving. So yeah, it's not working here yet. So let's go back. You can see it concatenated, or it has the totals listed in an array, so it does have them at one point. Yeah, use effect is worthless. I'm not going to use that. So my solution is fairly simple. I'm trying to sniff out the string NaN, which stands for not a number. All these other ones were letting it get passed as a number. So I'm going to basically say it's a string. It says NaN with the A with not caps. Does it say this? Because if so, don't count it. And that's how I fixed it. Simple. And let's just move on. Now let's install the Apex charts with vanilla JavaScript. Now we already found out that it's just a link to the actual software. So as opposed to doing this in React, which is just a tag that has the right naming, I'm going to show you here on their documentation at the very bottom. It shows you this little clip. This clip is what you put where you want to populate when you want to populate your chart with data that you've provided. And I'm going to go ahead and put it here. And what I remember, this is also in the middle of a for loop, so you're going to see it like repeat itself multiple times initially. And then I'll clean that up and get it out of the for loop and put it in the correct spot, which is at the end of the function once everything's been updated. So as you can see, I need the options and I need those series, but they need to be updated. And they're not. They're living up here stagnant at the top in this options variable. And they change during the functionality. So in which case I need to move that options object down into the function so it will grab the updated data as opposed to keep something empty. So as you can see, I do have the data. I mean, it's all lining up correctly, but there's no graph. So let me take this object that's called options. Yeah, see, these are the things that are required. Categories is required. Like all this stuff is required. And as here I'm verifying that these options are not updating as they live outside of that function, because they live on their own above as just a regular variable, and they just don't update. Look, you see how the data is empty? Data has an empty object, and so does categories. So that's the problem, is they didn't update when they live all by themselves up there at the top. If it was React, it would have updated. But since it is not, you need to reconfigure where that variable is located. It needs to be somewhere where it will pick up changes. So I'm going to move it. I'm going to move it down right there where it needs to be above the call of it in the chart. That way it'll have the latest. And as you can see now, it has the latest, but it's also in the middle of a for loop. So whatever it did multiple times over. And so you can clearly see that for loop, once again, has had me repeat myself in the same functionality multiple times. So let's go ahead and move that so that it only does it one time. And then we can add correctly. And it should be fairly easy. You can see the for loops up there, and it's clearly in the way. This thing's living in there. Move it down one more. I don't think this is enough. I think it's still in a for loop. Let's do it again. Yeah, it's still in the for loop. That's why it's been punched out multiple times. I'm just kind of seeing where the hierarchy and everything lives. I noticed that this is doing the same thing, so I just comment it out and just do it once. And as you can see, all the other things I've commented out I'm just not using anymore because we converted this. So let's take this where it calls and renders the chart and put it right down underneath the for loop, right before the catch error is over. There we go. We've got a working product. You type in your hours, and if you don't have any for that certain month, it'll just basically do nothing in the bar. It looks like that alert is in the wrong spot. It's just going to be a basic move around of a div. So the div for the container was not closed. Now it is. So any error should be okay now. So when they show the error, it should go all the way across the screen, not just a portion. There we go. Yeah, there's nothing for that month. Yeah, still working good. When you clock out, it does not make a new bar. It just says currently working. I hope you enjoyed this.